Welcome everyone, I'm Tim, I'm the founder of the Health Optimisation Summit, as you probably know by now. I'm also known as the UK's leading biohacker. So today we're joined by Dr Satchin Panda, who I'm very, very excited to introduce to you guys. Dr Panda is a professor at the Salk Institute and the leading authority on time-restricted eating and circadian rhythm optimization. He discovered the blue light sensor in the eyes and how it affected the sleep-wake cycle, depression, alertness, and leading to the light hacking revolution. He's also the author of the best-selling book, The Circadian Code, which I am a huge fan of, and I reference pretty much every day of my life, it seems. He's featured on all major platforms such as TED Talks, Bulletproof Radio, Ben Greenfield podcast, and with Dr. McCullough. And of course, and most importantly of all, he's speaking at the Health Optimisation Summit later this year. So welcome, Dr. Panda.
Thank you, Tim. I'm happy to be here.
So I guess we get stuck straight into it today. So, I mean, what's your personal experience with optimizing your circadian clock? And from the man himself, how would you define the circadian clock?
Yes, so circadian clock, the best way to define it would be to just look at your calendar. I mean, the thing is, we do a lot of things in a day, and it's really hard to get everything done unless we have a timetable and we put what time we want to do what. So similarly, our body has to do a jillion different things in a day, starting from digesting food, to repairing our skin, to saving memory, all this stuff. So everything cannot just happen at once. So that's why our body has come up with a daily calendar of what time the body should do what. And this calendar repeats itself every single day. So this approximately a daily calendar, that really means the circadian rhythm. So when we understand the circadian rhythm of what the body is supposed to do at what time, and if we do those things at the right time, then we're in sync with our calendar. Just like if you have a calendar and you check up every single thing that you have planned, then you feel super happy at the end of the day, and you feel ecstatic, you achieve something, you have a good night's sleep. Similarly, if we do stuff in a day according to our circadian rhythm, then our body is healed, rejuvenated, and is ready for another day. So coming back to your question, what have I experienced by aligning my circadian rhythm or living with my circadian rhythm? Numerous benefits. And initially, I didn't realize how powerful these benefits are. But as I look at my peers, my classmates from college or school who are my same age, may not be living in their perfect circadian alignment, I can see the profound change in myself. So for example, I must have lost 7 to 10 kilos in the last 6 to 7 years. And weight loss is the biggest thing, because as we gain weight, that extra fat causes a lot of different diseases and can increase our risk for many diseases. The second thing is when I look at my peers from schools and from my school and college, I see more than half of them are on some kind of medication to control their glucose, cholesterol, or something else, or blood pressure. And I'm proud that I'm drug-free. I'm not on any of those medications. Yeah. Then I sleep pretty well, because I used to have bad sleep. I used to wake up in the middle of the night for an hour. So now I sleep like a baby. I don't have any joint pain, no acid reflux. Even I haven't experienced a headache in the last 4 or 5 years. So these small things add up. And then I feel like, yes, I'm performing at my peak performance. And that's a very amazing thing, because if we think about what we always strive for is, irrespective of age, gender, ethnicity, or whatever medical condition you may have, we always aspire to perform at our peak performance at any given age. And that's exactly what I feel, that by aligning my circadian rhythm am performing at my peak performance at this age.
Yeah, yeah, it's very well put. I mean, I remember in your book you're talking about the tent. So when you went out camping, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I think that was it's actually an example I use a lot because it's just so simple. Like, as in terms of, if you're in a tent and there's no fake light,
yeah,
that resets you so quickly. It really does make us realize how much pollution we have around us after sunset. And it really stuck with me, that one thing. There's something else that we'll come on to later that really stuck with me as well. But yeah, it's really interesting. So what do you think were the main tweaks that you did to your day to resolve that then?
Well, there are very few tweaks actually. Just like you just mentioned, the light, evening light or excessive evening light keeps us awake, and that triggers a cascade of things that lead to circadian disruption. So one thing anyone can adopt is just figure out how to dim down light or change the spectral quality of light. And it has become much and much easier because almost all the devices that we have do have a night shift or night light feature. You can go to your laptop and cell phones and set them to turn on the night shift feature or night light feature around 9 o'clock. So it's not going to make you to sleep, but at least it's a nudge. Just like you have an alarm clock to wake up, there is a light nudge that the lights dim down and they become orange color. It signals you to wind down and then get ready for sleep. And that's one thing that I do. Second thing is almost all lights in our house are dimmable, or they're pretty low intensity light. So it's relatively not that brightly lit. And we use task light or table lamps to work on any surface. So light is one thing. Second is I do, after the bedroom is pretty dark, just like you said, it's really amazing to sleep in an absolutely dark bedroom. And what we have lost in modern days is the darkness. And once you have that darkness, you sleep like a baby. And in the morning, another thing is I try to eat all of my food within 10 hours max. And that helps me with a lot of different ways. I can control my food quality. My alcohol intake has gone down drastically because I cannot drink late in the and since I wake up with a good, healthy hunger, I have a pretty good big breakfast. And that's actually good for our health because in the first half of the day, our body is really primed to eat a good sized breakfast. And towards the end of the day, the body is really tired and cannot produce enough insulin. So you need to have smaller meal or no food 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. So these are some of the small changes I made. And I make sure that I go outside for 15 to 30 minutes or sometimes an hour to get some daylight.
Yeah.
I stopped wearing sunglasses a few years ago because I realized that I was actually under direct sun, maybe 5 to 10 minutes in a day, because most of the time I'm inside my car, or then when I'm in office, I'm also indoor. I really don't need sunglasses to protect myself from direct sunlight. And when I'm driving, unless the sun is right at the horizon, I don't need that, filter out that daylight, which is antidepressant and also aligns my work.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting you say about the eating point, because one thing, which is the other big thing that stuck in my mind, and I reference you so many times on this, it's absolutely ridiculous how many times I do, but it's how we produce up to 95 times less insulin around or after sunset. And when I read that, I was like, that's really, really interesting. And obviously genes turn on and off at different times, depending on what you do, et cetera, et cetera. But I was just like, I really wanted to test this personally, just to see, you know, how closely tied I was to this. And because I thought, oh, I could always eat, you know, at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, and it wouldn't affect me. But the interesting thing was, obviously using a constant glucose monitor and my Aura ring, and now using a BioStrap as well, just to compare notes. I noticed that, yeah, if I do eat around sunset, not after, then my blood glucose obviously comes down perfectly. And as a result, I get significantly more deep sleep. And if you overlap the two graphs, which you can't do in one app, it's almost identical as in terms of glucose comes down, deep sleep goes down, goes to the deepest point. And then obviously when you wake, then both of them obviously shoot up. So it's just really interesting. And it's like, I've tried to trick it so many times, but it's just so closely interlinked. It's brilliant. So yeah, so that had a big, profound impact on my day, actually. And everywhere I talk about it, I say this personal experience from what I'd read from your book. So it's really, really nice that you mentioned that. Yeah, and the other thing you're saying about the sleeping in dark, and I'd love your opinion on this, actually, because I always used to be in the mindset of sleep with a blackout room, like absolutely black, 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 cover over any LEDs, make sure there's no light, there's nothing at all. But then when I started wearing blue blocking glasses around sunset, 3-4 hours before sleep, and I would get sleep earlier, if I still kept up and I had a blacked out room in the morning, then my circadian rhythm would still be off if I kept myself up late. So it's like, well, actually, isn't it better to wear blue blockers and then not have a blackout blind in the morning? Because then you're going to sleep when you should be in the evening around after sunset, just blocking out the blue devices and then waking up with sunrise in the morning so your circadian rhythm matches with the day. I mean, I'd love to know your thoughts on that, actually.
Yeah, so since I live very close to a canyon, I have enough natural sound to wake me up, even though I have a blackout curtain, because there are a lot of animals, birds there. And that's how we used to wake up in nature.
Yeah.
So I guess I haven't done that experiment where it's very quiet and I'm sleeping in a blackout, completely dark room. But another point is, if you go to bed early enough, say at 10 or 10:30, then most of us will actually wake up after 8 hours in bed, whether there is darkness outside or whether there is noise or the absence of noise. But it's a good point to keep in mind, and maybe I'll experiment.
Yeah, I love trying all these little intricate things and just trying to break it. I mean, it's always an N=1 experiment, and what works for me doesn't work for someone else, etc. But it's really fun to play around with that. But okay, cool. So
yeah, it brought up a very good point that all of us should be little scientists and try what works for us.
Yeah, it's very cool. So I guess I'll move on to the point about the eating. So, I mean, what would you say the main benefits of time-restricted eating are specifically?
Well, we are almost every month now, we are learning something new about the benefits of time-restricted eating. Almost 9 years ago when we did the first experiment. And in fact, that time it was very surprising that it was a very simple experiment where we took mice because we can control every single calorie they eat and what time they eat. We put 2 groups of mice in the same food. They ate the same number of calories every single day. The only difference was one group was allowed to eat whenever they want, and then the time-restricted feeding group was allowed to eat only for 8 hours in the first experiment. And then we have changed it to 9, 10, 11, 12. And they eat the same number of calories from the same food source. But this time-restricted fed mice were completely protected from obesity, glucose intolerance or diabetes, fatty liver disease. So those are the initial findings that we published in 2012. And since then, this time-restricted eating, time-restricted feeding, or intermittent fasting has grown exponentially. And most people thought that the main benefit of time-restricted eating is weight loss. But actually what we're finding more and more is it has benefit for controlling your blood glucose. So pre-diabetics or early stage type 2 diabetes people can still do time-restricted eating and control their glucose. And sometimes the glucose control can kick in before substantial weight loss. Then in another human study, what we found is people, whether they're on a medication or not, if they have high blood pressure or hypertension, then time-restricted eating improved their blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and the improvement was disproportionately bigger than the weight loss. So that means some people did not have weight loss, but they still controlled their blood glucose much better. And the most surprising thing was diastolic blood pressure improved, which is very difficult to improve even with some medications. Then we also found that the cholesterol level improves, LDL cholesterol level drops under time to CAT within 3 to 4 months, but we haven't seen SDL cholesterol increasing within that time limit. Maybe it will take longer time. Then in the intervening period, we have seen studies coming up. Yeah, so in the intervening period, we have also seen many animal studies coming up showing time to eating reduces the risk for various types of cancer, or if the mice were experimentally put a tumor inside them, then the tumor doesn't grow as quickly as in ad libitum fed mice. So it seems to have protective effect against cancer. Then rodent studies are showing that it can also prevent or delay neurodegenerative disease, for example, Huntington disease and early stages of Alzheimer's disease. And recently there was a paper that came out showing it can even delay hearing loss in animals. So there's so many surprises that we're finding that time is eating. I know it makes me think that we are kind of at a turning point, maybe to a big discovery. That is, if we think about what is the biggest discovery or biggest assumption or theory in the last century, it was the germ theory of disease, which essentially said that most infectious diseases are due to bacteria, viruses, fungi, agents that are outside our body. And the germ theory of disease essentially said sanitation to keep the bugs away is the first step. Second step is if you get infected, then antibiotics will help you. And to prevent accidental disease, vaccines develop so we can get vaccinated against. It's like insurance system against infection. So now I would say that there is a circadian theory of health. Although germ theory of disease explained infectious disease, we cannot use that paradigm for chronic disease. And I think it's safe to say that there is a circadian theory of health. And that means that if you sustain a healthy circadian rhythm, that it will prevent or better manage, or in some cases can reverse chronic disease. And if you're without disease, then it can help you to stay healthy or increase your health span substantially. And it's not compromise your reproductive ability, because some of the interventions, for example, caloric restriction, we know that actually compromises fecundity in females, and time-based eating or better circadian rhythm should not compromise that. And it should also work in combination of drugs or nutraceuticals and supplements to further boost your health.
Complex set. I mean, circadian theory. I mean, it's really interesting how fast it's going, actually. And one thing that popped into my mind as you were saying that was about the female element, actually, and then the reproductive element and the hormone, the hormone issues that females seem to have around fasting in a too big a window. I mean, I think in your book it said 6 to 8 hours was the optimal. I find that 8 to 10 is optimal for me, and I find that for most females that I've discussed this with, it's 10, 12, maybe 13 hours. Otherwise, they start losing their periods and their hormones start going out of whack. So it's really, I'm not sure if that's something you covered in the book or if that's something that's evolved since or not.
Well, it's what we know is circadian disruption compromises female reproductive ability. The period gets irregular, and the ability to conceive is also compromised, both in animal models and what we have seen among shift workers. Conversely, what you're also finding is when we improve circadian rhythm by time-restricted eating, then these female reproductive hormones are improved. And I think there are a couple of papers either in pipeline or may appear soon showing that female reproductive function also improves under time-restricted eating.
Mm.
So these are some of the early signs. And we also know that women with PCOS or polycystic ovarian syndrome, those conditions, they improve their health under time-restricted eating.
Yeah, I've heard that so many times now. Actually, so many people have said about PCOS. A friend of mine had it, and she, I guess, biohacked her way out of it. And she's a functional coach, and yes, so many of her clients have had PCOS, and she put them on, a fasting window, made sure that she's eating the right nutrients at the right time of day, and it's amazing. And I must have had it 20 plus times now about PCOS specifically, which is really interesting, really, really interesting. So, so where do you think people should start with their time restricting eating specifically? Because for some people watching this, they might be, oh, I don't want to eat in a small window. I like waking up and having my cornflakes or whatever cereal, sugary cereal that they want, and eating and then having a coffee before they go to bed as well. And they're like, well, hang on a minute, you're telling me I have to eat in a short window. Baby steps sometimes helps with compliance long term. I mean, where do you think that people should start if this is completely new to them?
Well, the thing is, you got to think about you are not buying new gym membership. You're not buying new clothes and shoes to start something new. It's just delaying your breakfast slightly or advancing your dinner slightly. So think of that way. It's not a huge investment. You can try for 1 week and be prepared that the first week will be a little bit difficult because your old habits don't change easily. The idea is very simple, that in the first week when you're waking up, just try to, we know that if you, after wake up, some people want that coffee with sugar and cream or something within 15 minutes. But start thinking, why do you need that coffee? Is it because you are too sleepy and you want to completely wake up and be functional? And that may be, if that is the reason, then think about stepping outside, get some bright light. That actually will wake you up. So try to think why you need that, and then introduce small change. So you wait at least an hour before your first calorie, and it's not deprivation of food, it's just delaying it for a few minutes. Think of that. And then after you first start your first calorie, try to eat for the first week, maybe within 12 hours. So that means if you have your first calorie at 7 a.m., try to eat your last calorie at 7.
It's so easy when you're a pro. I think it's just like, how could I not eat in that window nowadays? It's quite funny. Sorry.
Yeah. And then this is where the practical matters may come in. So for example, if you have a long commute time coming from work, or if you have to have dinner with your children or with your spouse, say after 8 o'clock, then think what is much more important. Is that dinner much more important? And if it is so, then maybe delay your breakfast by another 1 hour and eat at 8 a.m. so that you can have your dinner with your loved ones by 8 p.m. So the first week is a little bit difficult. You have to kind of control that urge to go for the late night beer or some chips or snacks. But again, think about like you are not depriving yourself of food. You are just giving yourself a couple extra hours. And then from second or third week onwards, try to limit it to 10 hours. Because when you target for 10 hours, then you may end up achieving say 10.5 to 11 hours of eating and a few hours of fasting. But within 2 to 3 weeks, you will, if you pay attention to your own health, you'll see some improvement. Your sleep might improve. And if you have too much muscle pain or joint pain, you might see some improvement there. Your appetite may actually improve. So in the morning, if you're eating a bigger meal, then you will see that you are snacking less throughout the day. If you have acid reflux, that's one improvement I have seen personally, because I used to have acid reflux at least 2 or 3 times a week. And for the last 3-4 years, I never had acid reflux. I had to throw all of my acid reflux medications because they expired. So these are some of the small baby steps you can take. And then after a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, then you can be more brave. And you think that you may look back and wonder what the hell I was eating. Running for that bowl of cereal immediately after I woke up.
It's actually a really funny point because I think I read this in your work. It's when you eat is more important than what you eat, although both are important.
Yeah.
And that's in the rodent study that you did. I think that. Yeah. I think, and forgive me, it's my memoragination conjuring something up here, but I feel like you did say that the diet wasn't particularly healthy. It was more about the time restricted eating, and the ones that ate in that window actually lost weight, and the ones that didn't, even though it wasn't particularly great food. Does my memory serve correctly?
Yes, you're right. Actually, we gave this mice really unhealthy food. In fact, this food is given to mice to make them diabetic, obese, and have heart disease. All kinds of bad things happen if you give them the high-fat, high-sucrose diet. And we put the mice on the same high-fat, high-sucrose, but put them on time-restricted eating. They improved their health, and we thought, actually, somebody asked us that, are they really healthy or they are just vegetative? They're just lying there. They cannot do anything. We put them on a treadmill, and to our surprise, we were surprised, because what happens is when you put a mouse on a treadmill under certain conditions, they will run for 40, 45 minutes. If they're eating healthy diet, they will run for 60 minutes. Healthy diet whenever they want. We give them this really unhealthy diet, but they're eating within 8 to 10 hours. Then they will run for 150 minutes, almost more than twice. And we're surprised. We did that experiment 2 or 3 times. It's always the same. Even with unhealthy diet, you put them on time-restricted eating, they're actually more athletic.
Really? Wow, that's incredible. So what about, where does it come with a healthy diet in a time-restricted eating window?
Yeah, so those are even much better because they build up their muscle mass too. Healthy diet with time-restricted eating, at least the mice build up their muscle mass, and they don't have any sign of liver disease at all. I mean, mice on unhealthy diet with time-restricted eating, they have a little bit of liver disease, but then with healthy diet, no liver disease, and they're perfectly fine. They don't get enough infection also, so they're protected from many infectious disease.
Wow.
And in humans, of course, those are mouse studies. In humans, what happens is once you control your timing, the nutrition quality automatically improves. Just like I mentioned, when I stopped eating at 6:30 or 7 in the evening, my alcohol intake has significantly gone down. And that happens with almost everybody, that alcohol intake will go down. Second is when you fast overnight for 14 hours or longer, you have a healthy hunger in the morning. And if we think about it, for a lot of us, breakfast is the only meal on which we have complete control. And breakfast may be the meal for many of us, which is the healthiest one in the day, because we tend to have some fruits and fruits. We have some yogurt and some healthy carbohydrate and fibers for breakfast. So if you increase your breakfast, and if you're a little bit mindful, then it's very easy to improve your nutrition quality. And then once you have a big breakfast, you don't snack. Most snacks are sugary anyway, so you reduce your sugar intake. And so that's why I say the first step to healthy nutrition is time-restricted eating.
Yeah. So I want to ask something. What was it like when you guys had this realization of almost double the amount of running in treadmill for the in the wheel for the mice? Like, it must have been like, what have we stumbled across here? Like, what have we found?
The first thing was there must be something wrong. Maybe the treadmill resistance was reset or something. So then what we did was we blinded the experiment and we randomized. So the person who was doing the treadmill assay, that he or she did not know which mouse belongs to which group, because we also handpicked mice which were equivalent weight, so that He could not figure out. And then we repeated this study. And now that study has been repeated many times in our lab and by independent labs, and we always find the same thing.
That must have been amazing.
Yeah, and what is interesting is only when they eat within 10 hours or less, 8 to 10 hours, they eat the same number of calories, that have the endurance benefit. If they eat for 12 hours, that benefit disappears. The same number of calories within 10 hours or 9 hours or 8 hours will give them the endurance benefit, but not at 12 hours. So we think that there might be the length of fasting changes maybe their ketone bodies or the way their heart works or muscle works. So this is a fascinating area for investigation. But we assume that it's multi-organ because the mice have to breathe well, so their pulmonary health have to be pretty good, their heart health has to be good, muscles have to metabolize, and also brain has to function pretty well to have the motor coordination.
Wow, amazing, amazing. It just, I can only imagine what it would have been, like in there. Actually, that's it. So yeah, so I think we've covered like where people should start, how to ease into it, and I really like your example of 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for instance, and that makes it sound so easy. And then 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. or if you're eating with your family in the evening, I think that really makes it really accessible. So it's a nice way of framing it actually, and I think it sounds very easy. Obviously, there's a lot of hangry people out there, and I don't know how a lot of them will cope straight away. But I mean, I think it's because I've been doing it for so long now that I feel like it's absolutely easy to eat within a 10 or a 12-hour window. But yeah, really interesting, really, really interesting. So, what do you think ultimately? So we've covered light and we've covered food timing. What other things do you think that influence the circadian rhythm ultimately? Because one thing that I'd like to ask, I guess, before that is, what do you think about grounding when it comes to circadian rhythm? Because my friend Luke Story, who runs a podcast, he's a speaker as well, but whenever he flies to a new time zone, he jumps off the plane, he goes and grounds, connects with the ground in that area, and make sure that he sees sunrise, obviously, and times everything accordingly. And he says that grounding is the ultimate piece of the puzzle for it, but I'd love to know your opinion on it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we haven't done much experiment, and it's really hard to do that experiment, even in mice, because they're never grounded. They're always in plastic cages, and it's difficult to do that experiment. Second thing is, when people say they're grounded, what is happening is they're going outdoor and they may be barefoot, and it's not a few seconds touch with the earth. They're actually walking, doing some activities, and also exposed to light. So it will be interesting to see how do we disentangle that. And on a practical point of view, after I read those grounding, then I was thinking, when was the last time I actually touched outdoor surface in barefoot? And if you just pause for a while and ask yourself, a lot of us may not have touched the ground in last month or even a year. So it's a little bit difficult. Culturally, it's also difficult how to get down. Actually, after getting down from the plane, you get a chance to get grounded maybe an hour and a half after that, because you have to get accustomed to the stuff. So it'll be interesting to check that to see how it affects our health.
The reason why I say it, I think, is that, and the light piece is really important, I think, in it, because in the studies that they did, and I think there are very small ones, but showing how when you're grounding, your daily cortisol pattern comes back down into line, so basically help reset that. But it's really interesting. I wonder if the people with their cortisol out of whack actually didn't have much time outside before, and when they're out grounding, they're actually getting the natural light at the right time, which actually helps adjust that and prepare them for the evening ahead or whatever. So it's anyway, so I digress. So what are the other factors that you think are involved in it?
Well, I think the light and food as the most dominant factor so far that people have tested.
Mm.
Other cues, social cues do entrain our circadian rhythm, and then in terms of food, coffee actually resets our circadian clock. Pretty powerful. It's pretty powerful in resetting clocks, even in a simple cell line.
Mm.
Then there is new interest in exercise timing, how exercise affects health, or timing of exercise affects health. And the results are very interesting, and it makes sense because what we're finding is late afternoon physical activity is much better because we have less risk for injury. Because if you talk to any athlete, there is no athlete who never had injury. And you talk to many of the older people or people with diabetes or who are overweight or obese, for most of them, the number one cause why they don't want to exercise is they have some injury. So what we're finding is late afternoon, early evening exercise reduces the risk for injury because your muscle tone is better, your joint flexibility is at its peak, body temperature is high, so you don't need that warm up as much as you need in the morning. And another surprise thing is that's when, if you exercise, then it controls your blood glucose much better than in the morning. And in fact, we're designed to be active more in the late afternoon because our ancestors, when they were coming back from agricultural field or hunting or gathering, then as soon as there was night, it was complete darkness. So you have to run back to home. It's a race against time to get home. And we clearly see that when we put the activity trackers on hunter-gatherers in Argentina, we do find these Argentinian towas, they have highest physical activity right before sunset. That's when they're running back home, finishing all the outdoor activities to get home. And why this is important is that's the time when our pancreas is beginning to slow down in preparation of sleep, so it's not producing enough insulin. And we know that when we eat, the glucose in our blood has to be absorbed into muscle and different organs with little help from insulin. But what people often forget is even in the absence of insulin, exercise will help that glucose get absorbed. So that means late afternoon exercise will help everybody to absorb much better glucose with less help from insulin. And this becomes more important for people with pre-diabetes or diabetes. In the US, as we know, nearly half of the adult population has diabetes or pre-diabetes. And for them, a late afternoon brisk walking or even a little bit of running or exercise goes a long way. It's almost like having an anti-diabetic drug in the evening.
Who would have thought it? Crazy, huh? Yeah, it's funny because I've always said to exercise before kind of 4 or 5 o'clock latest, because otherwise it just starts, as your body starts winding down, you start stressing it again, and your cortisol isn't necessarily going to be as high as it should be. So, et cetera. But the running home and before sunset really makes sense. And it's funny how the cave analogy and the family in the cave and the hunter-gatherer bringing back the food, being able to eat little bits more throughout the day, and the female not having to fast so much because she's got food in the cave. This analogy, it seems to work so beautifully in so many cases, in so many findings at the moment I'm finding.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Africa on a safari, I realized that because we are living in this on the safari ground, very close to the safari ground. And this guy has told us that you have to finish your dinner and get back to your tent before sunset because there are animals outside. So, when we live in the city, we don't have that primal fear. And that's the first time I got that primal fear that I finished my dinner and it was a little bit kind of getting twilight zone. I can still see my way back, but walking and hearing even the slightest noise from a bush would make your cortisol level go through the roof because you are right next to like where the lions are roaming, and we know that there are tic-tics and deers on the ground, and the the ground. So we knew that there may be animals nearby. So sensing that primal fear actually made me aware that what about our ancestors? They had no protection. They and they didn't even have a bright flashlight to light up.
Crazy.
Yeah.
We're very lucky, aren't we, to be in these times,
Yes.
and to have the knowledge of a lot of knowledge from the past and mixing it with the present. We're very fortunate, aren't we? So
yeah.
So okay, this is I guess the final question really, and this might be an interesting challenge, but what would a perfectly aligned circadian aligned day look like, do you think, ultimately, if we were to talk about it in a format?
Yeah, so I'll step back for a minute and say, we have been living with our circadian rhythm for the last 200,000 years, ever since we evolved on this planet. But only in the last 150 years after the electrical lighting, circadian disruption happened. And only in the last 20 to 40 years, it has exacerbated. And only in the last maybe 10 years, we have woken up to the importance of circadian rhythm. So it's almost like the lead and asbestos moment for health, because in the 70s we figured out lead and asbestos were bad for us, and we have been dealing with that for the last 50 years. So similarly now the question is, how do we build a perfect anthropogenic circadian world where the world around us and our personal habits actually foster that circadian rhythm? Of course, it will take a few decades, but we can begin by taking a few steps. So one is your circadian day actually starts the moment you get into the bed the previous night, because what time you get into the bed determines what time you wake up, how much sleep you'll get, and how functioning you are the next day. So number one is try to be in bed at a time so that you can be in bed for 8 hours. So if you're in bed for 8 hours, then you're more likely to sleep for 7 to 7.5 hours, which is considered healthy for an adult. And number two is, after waking up, wait for at least an hour, or even better, 2 hours before your first calorie. And if you really want to have something, start with hot water, or maybe hot water with caffeine or tea to make your day start, but no calories, please. And then number three will be, after your first calorie, count 8, 9, 10, or maximum 12 hours within which you'll consume all your calories. So you can have 8-hour TRE, 10-hour TRE, 11 or 12 hours TRE, or intermittent fasting, you can say. Then number four is, your last calories should be at least 2 hours before bedtime. Or in other words, no bright light and no calories for 2 hours before bedtime. And the number five is, during daytime, try to be outdoor for 30 minutes under daylight, because daylight is the best antidepressant. It entrains your circadian clock. It makes you happy. It's plentiful and free. It's almost like getting an antidepressant for free. And you just have to step outside. And if you're outside, take a brisk walk. And that's enough to be in sync with circadian rhythm.
Yeah. It's funny actually, because I used to be a fan of the Lumi lights, the sad lighting, and I remember 15 years ago someone said to me, "Oh, I've got seasonal affective disorder." This is before I wasn't even aware. I mean, I didn't even think about health, in all honesty, at that point, so I hadn't got ill. But and they said, "Oh, I've got seasonal affective disorder and I should use a blue light," and I was just like, "Are you crazy? Like, that's like wizardry or something. That's not real." And it's just funny how, obviously they've become more mainstream now, but it's funny how they are great, and they're really good if you're in the northern hemisphere, obviously, and you're in the top of Norway or something, or Iceland at a certain time of year. But natural light, it's so funny, isn't it, how people, like you said about when was the last time you got your shoes off. I mean, I do it every day, and I force myself to do it because I found such a massive benefit. But most people, when I ask this on a stage and I say, you know, raise of hands who's taken his shoes off and been in the garden lately, I might get one in the last week, you know, a few in the last month, and it's usually when they're hanging the washing out. Which, but in the same token as like during, you know, COVID times and lockdowns, how many times have you actually been outside during the day and just sat in the garden or sat on the doorstep if you haven't got a garden and just had natural light and says phone screens and stuff? And it's, you know, no wonder they feel depressed, because they're having Netflix as light opposed to there's the sky, you know. And it's like, well, I think it's a massive thing that people just don't have the awareness around, how natural daylight is so powerful, you know. And they say, well, it's cloudy, so I'm not going to get sunlight. But it's not just about the sunlight. It's full spectrum, delicious light. It's a nutrient for us, and so many people just don't realize it. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. No, that's what, even in a cloudy day in London, if you go outside, you still have 5,000 to 10,000 lux of light, which is brighter than the best, brightest light you can buy and put inside your home.
Yeah, and it's free.
Yeah, it's free.
Absolutely and utterly. Yeah, amazing. So we've covered so much, and I think what the day looks like and the things to optimize. I mean, if there was one thing that people could start doing today, other than, you know, what we've covered, is there anything that you think that they should start like right now? I'm sure I can guess the answer, but I'm really interested to hear what the top thing would be.
Yeah, the top thing would be the 10 hours time restricting.
Yeah.
Because once you start doing that, then everything seems to fall in its right place. Improves your sleep. And then if you're well rested, then you are more likely to step outside during the day, enjoy the day. It will improve your nutrition, and it just improves your performance.
Yeah, amazing. Well, it's been absolutely awesome to record with you today. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person with everything that's coming up later on this year. We're far enough away, thankfully, with everything changing in the world so quickly. But I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person soon. And just so that people know where to find you, obviously, I think you're most active on Twitter. I think you are on Instagram, but I think Twitter is the most popular for you.
Yeah.
It's at Satchin Panda, which is Satchin.panda on Instagram. And the website is salk.edu, and then actually salk.edu, and then I'll send a link out with the show notes so that everyone can find where to get to your site. And yeah, so looking forward to seeing you at the summit later on this year, Dr. Panda, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Tim, and have a perfect circadian day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.